It's beautiful, isn't it? The way water slowly works its way into ponds and oceans, only to evaporate into the sky, turn into a large collective of tiny droplets and fuse back together into larger drops and fall from great heights just to ruin some stinker's picnic. You know, rain itself is kind of a paradox. Like, it's cold but humid, angry yet calming, destructive and life-giving all at once. Something you can't really describe. Only experience. Scientists can argue when humans started talking, but nonetheless, I'd say it's one of our most defining characteristics that separate us from every other tangible thing in this universe. It's really mind-boggling how random sounds coming from our food hole and crazy scratches on flattened wood soup can carry with it the ability to allow us to share information and communicate emotion like no other species. And yet, it can only go so far. You can't describe your favorite color to a blind man or a life-changing meal to someone over the phone. You can think up the most beautiful thing in your mind, but it's next to impossible to express its true magnificence to a standard-by. So I guess ever since the origin of storytelling, there's been two main ways of arting. What I am calling for the purposes of this video, sensory storytelling and narrative storytelling. Now, don't get me wrong, these forms of expression aren't mutually exclusive, but there is sort of a scale. On one side, you have stuff like books and stories that you tell around a campfire, where the entire narrative is communicated and you have to leave it up to your audience to interpret the meaning from your descriptions. However, most stories don't have it as 100% narrative storytelling. Anything from a small picture at the start of a chapter to show how a character looks to hand movements to emphasize points is utilizing sensory storytelling. And the more you get into a lot of modern media, you see more and more of it in stuff like plays, movies, TV shows, and music. But what would happen if you went to the pure other side of the scale? You forgo any narration or dialogue or even text on screen, and you tell an entire story with just vibes. Well, to answer this question, today we'll be analyzing one of the best episodes in all of television, Rain. Good morning, I'm Joel Lamb, and this video is about Bluey. In case you hadn't looked at the thumbnail. Now, don't misunderstand. Bluey is far from the first to have this idea of let's tell a story without dialogue. In fact, some of Pixar's most acclaimed films have large sections in the intro where little to no one speaks. And in many animated short films, not hiring voice actor is practically a tradition since forever. In fact, back in the early days of moving pictures, there was no reliable way to sync audio and video, forcing all movies to lack talking. Granted, most of those early films worked around it by putting dialogue on screen or having actual live people perform the music, but my point still stands that throughout history of film and animation, there's been experimentation with pure sensory storytelling. In fact, there were even some episodes of Bluey that come rather close, like Sleepy Time and Handstand, both of which use very little dialogue. But Rain, on the other hand, has zero dialogue at all. Okay, well, the episode begins with Bluey and her mom saying goodbye to Bingo and Dad as they drive away. But other than that, it's just music. Not even grunts or groans from the voice actors make it in. Not even the title card gets a voice line. So how do you even tell a story without dialogue? How do you even tell a story at all? Well, I would say that all storytelling is based on character motivation. Let's take Rain as an example. As the episode begins, the titular precipitation starts to fall from the sky. Chili, being the responsible adult that she is, starts to take in the laundry. However, Bluey, being the 6-year-old that she is, wait, no, this episode takes place after past Sparkle. She is 7 now. Anyway, she starts to play in the rain and gets muddy and wet. She dances in the yard until she starts to notice water running down the driveway. And it's at that point her motivation is formed. She's gonna build a dam. But it's also not long before the conflict starts. Chili gives Bluey an umbrella to avoid wet dogs in the house, but Bluey just uses it for the dam. or tries to. So Bluey starts to gather supplies that will actually block water. She runs inside to get some blocks, tracking in much water to the dismay of her mother, who confronts her at the door. Chili eventually lets Bluey back outside and puts a towel at the door, but Bluey just yoinks it for the dam. And when Chili gets another one, Bluey grabs it out of her hands before she even leaves the washroom. So Chili mops up all the water, but just as she finished, Bluey tries to get back in, leading to the narrative climax of the episode as the music crescendos. Now it's time for everyone's favorite part of the video. Joel talks about music for a prolonged period of time. Almost as good as the part of the video where Joel asks you to subscribe. You see, most TV shows and movies treat music as little more than a background noise to set the mood and not be paid attention to. Which is why Bluey has always stuck out to me as odd, because they don't do that. Each individual episode has its own little song with all the love and care put into it as the release of a big singer. Most of these songs can even stand on their own, and do. Bluey music gets hundreds of thousands of views by itself. So I imagine it was stressful to write music for an episode like this, where it's forefront and center the entire time. From what I've gathered, they probably went through several versions of this episode's theme before landing on the ones they used. One of which we do know was recycled for a later episode, Turtleboy. But eventually Jazz Darcy wrote the piece the soundtrack calls Rain. Rain is written in the key of C major, meaning if you want to play it, you don't need any black keys. The melody tends to follow a walking motion, starting from the G note and dancing down an octave, and then back up. And the chorus follows a similar motion, but goes up to C and then back down to D, creating this infinite loop that doesn't really have an end, because D is kind of a leading note. So if you end a melody with it, it sounds unfinished. So you just end up repeating it forever. But I'm fine with that. In a previous video I made about Copycat, I also mentioned that C and G are two notes / chords that are often used together. And you can see that in full effect in this song. As both the song and the episode climax, you see one final confrontation of Bluey trying to get inside, as Chili physically blocks her. Also, I love how they just sync up the animation perfectly with the music. That's just amazing. But Bluey eventually squeezes through to grab a dollhouse, and Chili kind of gives up. And the music slows to a stop as Chili lets out a single sigh. The only other voice clip in this whole episode. I wonder what that recording session was like. As Chili watches her daughter play in the rain, a new, more shimmery song starts to play. Whoop, I'm back in the music theory corner. You thought I was done, but nope, this episode has 2 songs. As I mentioned earlier, Rain was written by Jazz Darcy. However, this new song entitled Rainbow was written by a good old busker friend, Joff Bush. What's interesting to me about Rainbow is that it's written in a key that is exactly 1 semitone up from Rain. Rain is in the key of C major. However, Rainbow is in the key of C sharp major. This is a very slight but an impactful change that creates sort of a splash in the face effect, as described by Joff Bush, where the music shifts keys as Chili also shifts perspective. But hey, that's just a theory. A music theory. Thanks for watching. This video is not over, please keep watching. As Chili watches, Bluey tries to keep the water dammed up, but ultimately, it seems like it's all in vain when this magically framed shot happens. Okay, can I just nerd out about the shot composition for a few seconds? We see the water pool at her feet as the camera tracks the flowing water to the center of the shot. You get one short reaction shot of Bluey being sad before zooming back into the water. The water gets almost too far for Bluey to hold it back when the camera zooms forward, tracking Chili's feet instead as she steps from behind Bluey and stands in place, covering the gap in the dam where the water was about to flow through. I mean, damn, that's good. Relax, I didn't put an N in the script, so I'm talking about dams. It's fine. We get to see one final moment of reunion where Chili is finally able to see the world from Bluey's perspective again, as she throws to the side her umbrella so she can hold back the water with her hands, finally covering the entire width of the driveway, creating a final wholesome moment where the water almost reaches the end of the driveway as Chili and her daughter wag their tails in sync. When suddenly, the rain stops and the water retreats. Because sometimes, even after hard work, conflict, and perseverance, a simple law of nature can stop you from achieving your goals. At first, Bluey's sad as Chili comforts her, but as we all know, after the rain comes the sun, and with the sun comes the rainbow, crafting one last beautiful shot before Chili and Bluey start to head inside. But just as they're about to walk up the steps, the skies darken again and rain starts to fall as mother and daughter share one glance before running back to the dam as the credits roll. So let's go back to the question I asked near the beginning of this video. How do you tell a story without words? Well, you do it by focusing on the characters. Make them believable with relatable motivations, and then emphasizing that by structuring the music and composition around the emotions the story is trying to convey. But hold on. Something's wrong. I'm not sure you noticed, but I usually try to end these analyses with a big emotional send-off. However, I kinda already did the emotional send-off for Rain in my very first Bluey video. That large outro I wrote about the nature of growing up was inspired largely by this episode and the unused lyrics that were written but were scrapped and reused in the soundtrack. And that song literally gave me an emotional crisis for about a week. And if you want to hear more about that, I'll link the video at the end of this one. However, in this video, I would like to end with a request for you. There's been a pet peeve I've had with the film and animation industry for a while now, and that's just this over-reliance and over-focus on actors. For some reason, whenever promoting a show or movie with behind-the-scenes stuff, the head honchos in charge almost exclusively showcase actors. And don't get me wrong, actors are wonderful people who add so much life and personality to the characters, and it makes sense to me in live action, where it is literally the face you're seeing, that people would become attracted to them. However, animation is kind of a different story. The amount of work that every department puts into an animated show is often completely overlooked by the general public. Think about the storyboarders who plan out the shots. Think of the animators who carefully puppeteer the characters and give them character, or painstakingly draw frame by frame to create the illusion of life. Think of the background artists who create these beautiful worlds they get to live in. Think of the composers who make the music and the sound designers who emphasize every motion. There's so many more I could put here, but you get the point. But the funny thing about Ludo Studios and Bluey is they don't shy away from these unsung heroes. They are constantly showcasing the hard work of these amazing people with behind-the-scenes videos and sometimes even in the episodes themselves. And in an episode like Rain, where there is no dialogue, you are all but forced to stop and appreciate the hard work and dedication put into this spectacular show. So next time you watch an episode of your favorite show, don't forget to take a closer look and take notes of the things that everybody else takes for granted. I hope you enjoyed this video, and go check out the video I mentioned earlier. It's one of my oldest videos, but it's still pretty decent, I think. I'm Joel Lamb. Have a wonderful day.